Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to try to wrap our heads around something pretty wild.
Yeah.
Magnetic fields.
Magnetic fields?
But not the kind that stick your grocery list to the fridge.
No.
We're talking about how even weak magnetic fields, like the ones all around us, can actually mess with
Yeah.
the basic processes of life.
Yeah, down at the molecular level.
Yeah, so down at the level of molecules and how they interact. And
Precisely.
we've got two great sources to help us navigate this.
Right.
First up, a review article
Okay.
that lays out the big picture. Magnetic field effects in biology from the perspective of the radical pair mechanism.
Yeah, that's going to be our roadmap.
It's our map for this journey.
All right.
Then we're going to zero in on a really cool research paper.
Okay.
Spin biochemistry modulates reactive oxygen species.
ROS.
ROS.
Production by radiofrequency magnetic fields.
That one's going to give us a close-up view of some cutting-edge findings.
Yeah, some real nitty-gritty details.
So if you stick with us, our mission is to understand how these, seemingly subtle magnetic forces,
Yeah.
the steady ones and the ones that zip around as radio waves, how they might actually be tweaking the very machinery of life.
Yeah.
Everything from sleep cycles
Wow.
to how cells grow and talk to each other.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Get ready for some, I think, some unexpected connections between physics and biology.
For sure.
Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, well, it's kind of interesting to start with a little bit of history here.
Yeah.
The idea of using magnets to heal, that's not new.
No.
People have been doing that for centuries.
Right.
Trying to use static magnetic fields
Right.
for wound healing, bone regeneration.
Yeah, like broken bones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even today, magnetic fields are, super important
Yeah.
in modern medicine, like with MRI.
Huge in MRI.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's not a completely foreign concept.
Right. And while some of that historical stuff might,
Yeah.
make you raise an eyebrow a little. What's really interesting is that the latest research
Yeah.
is starting to uncover some seriously cool ways
Yeah.
that static magnetic fields can actually interact with different kinds of cells.
Right.
Including stem cells.
Yeah.
Which everyone's really excited about.
Huge potential there.
Right. So it's moving beyond,
Yeah.
just sort of folklore into hardcore biology.
Absolutely. And, that review article we were talking about,
Yeah.
it has this table, super helpful table,
Yeah.
that summarizes a bunch of effects that static magnetic fields have on all sorts of biological functions.
Wow.
And what's wild is that the strength of these fields isn't anything crazy.
Right.
It's often in the, microtesla to millitesla range.
Yeah.
Which is like comparable to or even weaker than
Right.
magnets you might find just lying around.
Yeah, like just the everyday magnets.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pull out some specific examples
What-
from that table that really grabbed my attention. For instance, they mentioned that even a tiny 0.5 millitesla field can boost the response of cryptochrome.
Interesting.
And we'll talk more about cryptochrome later.
Yeah.
It's basically this protein that's key
Right.
for sensing magnetic field in some animals.
Yeah.
Like birds.
Birds.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then there's this crazy study on fruit flies
Yeah, what about it?
showing that a relatively weak static field
Okay.
actually made them bigger.
Whoa, bigger.
Yeah.
Physically bigger.
Yeah, physically bigger. Like their bodies were bigger, while a stronger field actually shrunk their wings.
That's so strange.
It's like you said, it's this gentle nudge in the electromagnetic environment can have a pretty big impact.
Yeah, a surprisingly big impact.
Of development.
Wow.
And it makes you think about, we're bathed in this electromagnetic environment all the time.
That's right, yeah.
What's that doing?
It really makes you wonder what subtle effects are happening that we don't even realize.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and it gets even weirder.
Oh, yeah.
The table also mentions effects on seizure response
Right.
in fruit flies.
Interesting.
Again, maybe linked to cryptochrome.
Yeah.
And even changes in how calcium moves in and out of cells
Oh, wow.
at just 0.6 millitesla.
Calcium, that's huge.
And calcium, like you said, is super important.
Yeah, it's vital for so many cellular processes.
Right, for all sorts of signaling inside cells.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So these examples really highlight that even weak static magnetic fields can have these far-reaching effects.
Yeah, and really important ones.
Yeah, really important ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're seeing these effects,
Right.
but what's actually going on inside the cells to make this happen?
Good question.
And this is where these things called reactive oxygen species
No,
or ROS come into play.
Okay.
Now, we often hear about ROS in the context of like aging.
Yeah. Aging, disease, damage, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. They get a bad rap.
They get a bad rap. But it's important to remember that ROS aren't just villains.
No, they're not all bad.
Right.
Right.
They also have these super important roles as signaling molecules.
Absolutely, yeah.
In normal, healthy processes.
Yeah.
So think of them as like the double-edged swords of the cellular world.
I like that.
Right. Too much and they cause damage.
Right.
But in the right amounts, they're essential messengers.
Yeah, they tell the cell what to do.
Yeah.
Like, for example, hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah.
It's involved in regulating all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And its levels in the cell are really tightly controlled.
Right. It's all about balance.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just about damage, it's also about communication.
Yeah, communication is key.
Now, the review mentions a bunch of studies that have found higher levels of ROS in various cell types.
Okay, like what kind of cells?
Like nerve cells.
Nerve cells, all right.
Immune cells.
Immune cells,
Even stem cells.
Wow, even stem cells.
When they're exposed to static magnetic fields.
Interesting.
And again, these weren't super strong magnets.
Okay.
You know, ranging from microtesla up to millitesla.
Right.
So what's fascinating here is this idea that the radical pair mechanism, which we'll get to in a minute, might actually be how these relatively weak magnetic fields can change how much ROS these cells are making.
Okay, so the magnetic field is kind of like a volume knob.
Yeah, like a volume knob, exactly.
For ROS production.
Yeah.
And there's also research suggesting that these weak fields can actually influence the activity of the mitochondria.
Right, the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, the powerhouse of the cell. Specifically affecting some parts of the electron transport chain.
Okay.
Which is how cells make energy.
Right, ATP. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe even boosting cellular respiration.
Wow.
And guess what? This is also thought to be connected to the radical pair mechanism.
So it's popping up again?
Popping up all over the place.
Interesting.
And to bring it back to stem cells, the review points out that weak magnetic fields below 1 millitesla have been shown to change how stem cells grow and differentiate.
And is ROS involved here too?
And again, ROS seems to be part of the story.
Okay, so it's like this recurring theme.
Yeah, it's like this recurring theme.
We've got magnetic fields.
Right.
These radical pairs, which we still need to explain.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
And then ROS acting as both signals and potential troublemakers.
Yeah, the double-edged sword.
The double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Okay, so to really understand how these weak magnetic fields might be having these effects, we need to get down to the nuts and bolts.
All right, let's do it.
Of radical pair mechanism.
Radical pair mechanism, or RPM.
RPM.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting. Because it takes us into the world of quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics.
Yeah, buckle up.
All right, I'm ready.
So first of all, what exactly is spin in this context?
Okay, so at its most basic level, spin is a quantum mechanical property of particles, like electrons.
Okay.
You can kind of think of it as this intrinsic angular momentum.
Okay, so it's like it's spinning.
Yeah, you could think of it that way, but it's not really spinning in the way we normally think about it.
Right, it's a quantum thing.
It's a quantum thing, yeah.
Okay.
So for electrons, this spin can be in one of two directions.
Okay.
Often we call them, up or down.
Okay, up or down, got it.
Yeah.
All right.
So when you have two electrons paired together in a molecule, their spins can align in two main ways.
All right.
They can be anti-parallel, meaning pointing in opposite directions.
Okay.
And that's called the singlet state.
Singlet state.
Where their total spin cancels out.
Right.
Or they can be parallel.
Okay.
Pointing in the same direction.
Same direction.
And that's the triplet state.
Triplet state.
With a net spin.
Got it. Okay.
Think of it like two dancers.
Okay. I like this analogy.
In the singlet state, they're moving in perfect opposition.
Right.
Canceling each other out.
Right.
In the triplet state, they're moving in sync.
Okay.
Creating a combined energy.
Got it. So singlet and triplet states.
Yeah.
All right. Now, how do these states actually relate to chemical reactions?
Good question.
And crucially to magnetic fields.
Okay. So a radical is just a molecule that has an odd number of electrons.
Okay.
Which means it has at least one unpaired electron.
Got it.
And radical pairs are formed when a chemical bond breaks, leaving each fragment with one of those unpaired electrons.
Okay.
Or when an electron jumps from one molecule to another.
Okay, got it.
Now, here's a super important principle.
Okay.
In most biochemical reactions that involve organic molecules, spin is conserved.
Spin is conserved.
Meaning, if a radical pair is born from a molecule where the electrons were in a singlet state, the new radical pair will also start in a singlet state.
Okay.
Same goes for triplets.
So it's like it inherits the spin state.
Exactly. It inherits
from its parent molecule.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay. Spin conservation. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a fundamental principle.
So what's the link between magnetic fields and these radical pairs?
Okay. This is where the Zeeman and hyperfine interactions come in.
Okay.
Picture the electron as a tiny little compass needle.
Okay.
The Zeeman interaction describes how a big external magnet, like the magnetic field, influences that tiny compass needle.
Right.
Affecting the energy of its spin state.
Okay.
Separately, the unpaired electron in the radical can also interact with these tiny local magnetic fields created by the nuclei of nearby atoms.
Okay.
And this is called the hyperfine interaction.
Hyperfine interaction, okay.
It's like these tiny little magnets within the molecule itself.
Right.
Kind of nudging that electron spin around.
Okay.
In slightly different ways.
So it's like a combination of the big overall magnetic environment and these tiny magnetic whispers.
Exactly.
Coming from inside.
Yeah, from its own neighborhood.
Okay.
And at low magnetic field strengths.
Right.
It's often these hyperfine interactions.
Okay.
Those subtle magnetic fields through the nuclear spins that are the main drivers of something called intersystem crossing.
Intersystem crossing.
Yeah, big word.
Yeah.
But it's basically this quantum mechanical phenomenon where the radical pair can flip between its singlet and triplet states.
Right.
And then the external magnetic field can modulate this flipping by slightly changing the energy difference between those singlet and triplet states.
Okay, so it's like the magnetic field is kind of like a referee.
Yeah, a referee.
Influencing how easily the radical pair can flip-flop.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay, and why is all this flipping between singlet and triplet states so important for chemistry?
Well, because the singlet and triplet states of a radical pair often lead down different chemical pathways, resulting in different products. When the radicals recombine or react with other molecules.
Got it.
So, for example, a radical pair in a singlet state might be more likely to recombine to form the original molecule. While a triplet state might favor a different reaction with a nearby molecule. So by kind of subtly influencing the probability of a radical pair being in a singlet or a triplet state, a magnetic field can effectively nudge.
That's like a nudge.
It's a nudge. The outcome of a biochemical reaction.
So a weak magnetic field can be like a quantum traffic controller?
Yeah, I like that.
For these chemical reactions that are happening.
That's a great way to put it.
All the time inside us.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about quantum beats earlier.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds pretty wild.
It is pretty wild.
What are those?
Okay, so because the singlet and triplet states have slightly different energies. When these magnetic interactions are present, the radical pair can actually oscillate between the two states.
Okay, so it's like it's flipping back and forth?
Yeah, rapidly switching back and forth.
Wow.
These oscillations are what we call quantum beats.
Quantum beats, okay.
It was the theoretical prediction for a long time.
All right.
But recently, researchers have actually been able to directly observe these coherent oscillations.
Wow, so they're actually seeing this happening.
Yeah, they're seeing it.
Amazing.
It's really amazing.
Okay, now the review goes on to discuss some specific examples in biology where this radical pair mechanism seems like a pretty plausible explanation for observed magnetic field effects.
All right, let's hear them.
So let's dive into those.
Yeah, let's pick some.
The first one is about xenon anesthesia.
Xenon anesthesia. Okay.
Well, tell me about that.
Yeah, this is a really cool example.
Okay.
Researchers found that how well xenon works as an anesthetic in mice actually depends on which specific isotope of xenon is being used.
Oh, wow. Isotopes.
Isotopes, yeah.
Okay.
Isotopes with a non-zero nuclear spin.
Okay, meaning?
Meaning their nuclei have their own little magnetic moment.
Okay.
Were less potent anesthetics.
So they didn't work as well?
They didn't work as well.
Yeah.
Compared to isotopes with no nuclear spin.
Okay.
And this really strongly suggests that the radical pair mechanism is involved somehow.
Wow.
And how xenon interacts with the brain.
Okay, so why would the nuclear spin of the xenon atom actually make a difference?
Okay, so remember how we were talking about nuclear spins contributing to those hyperfine interactions within a radical pair? So different isotopes with different nuclear spins will have slightly different hyperfine interactions, which in turn can affect the rate at which the radical pair flips. Between its singlet and triplet states.
Right, that back and forth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that ultimately influences the outcome of some spin-dependent process.
Wow.
So in the case of xenon anesthesia, the current thinking, and this is supported by a figure in the review, is that xenon might briefly interact with the NMDA receptor in the brain, which is super important for nerve signaling.
Like
a key player.
Right.
And specifically with certain amino acid residues like tryptophan. Yeah, and this interaction could potentially lead to a temporary transfer of an electron and the formation of a radical pair.
So the xenon molecule might be like briefly forming this radical pair with part of this brain receptor.
That's the idea.
And the different nuclear spins of the xenon isotopes are subtly changing the lifetime.
Yeah, or the behavior.
Yeah, the behavior of that radical pair.
Yeah.
Which then ultimately affects how well the xenon works as an anesthetic.
Exactly. That's the current thinking.
It's wild.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The relative amounts of singlet and triplet states in this hypothetical radical pair would be sensitive to the xenon isotope's nuclear spin. And this could influence the anesthetic effect.
Okay, my mind is still a little blown by that.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
What about lithium and hyperactivity?
Okay, lithium.
Lithium's a common treatment for bipolar disorder, right?
That's right, it is.
Okay.
And just like with xenon, there's evidence suggesting isotope-dependent effects of lithium.
Wow, really?
Yeah, in treating hyperactivity.
Okay.
So the review proposes a potential mechanism involving the formation of radical pairs within a complex that includes protein oxyanions and hydrated lithium ions.
Okay.
So the idea is that lithium might exert some of its therapeutic effects, at least in part, by influencing the spin dynamics of these radical pairs.
So a drug we use to stabilize mood might be working on some level through these tiny quantum interactions.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. Yeah. And the review also makes a connection between magnetic fields and lithium to our circadian clock.
Yeah, our internal timekeeper.
Yeah, the one that governs our sleep-wake cycle.
Sleep-wake, yeah.
And so much more.
Well, much more, yeah.
All right.
It's super important.
Super important. So tell me about that.
Okay, so the circadian clock is vital for regulating all sorts of physiological and behavioral processes.
Yeah.
And you're right, when it's disrupted, it's linked to conditions like bipolar disorder.
Right.
So researchers have found that lithium can actually lengthen the period of the circadian clock in fruit flies.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So it's messing with their...
It's messing with their internal clock.
Yeah, their internal clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this effect seems to be isotope dependent.
Wow.
Yeah, so that points to some sort of nuclear spin shenanigans.
Right, some quantum stuff going on.
Quantum stuff, exactly.
Okay.
Now, interestingly, just like magnetic fields, lithium also has effects on oxidative stress.
Right.
And we know that the balance of ROS
that balance
is super important for the circadian rhythm to work properly.
Right. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Right. Okay, so the model they're proposing is trying to tie all of this together.
It's ambitious.
It's ambitious, but cool.
It is cool.
Magnetic fields.
Right. Lithium,
circadian clock.
Oxidative stress. And using the radical pair mechanism as the central thread.
The central thread, right.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
It's a pretty elegant model.
And there's a figure in the review that shows this.
Yeah, they actually have a nice diagram.
Yeah.
To visualize it.
Okay, another fascinating example they discuss is the effect of hypomagnetic fields.
Hypomagnetic fields,
so these are really weak magnetic fields.
Weaker than the Earth's.
Way weaker than the Earth's natural field on how microtubules
reorganize themselves.
Interesting, okay.
And microtubules, just to remind everyone, they're these structural components within our cells.
part of the cytoskeleton.
Yeah, like the scaffolding inside the cell.
Yeah, the internal scaffolding.
Right.
They're super important for cell shape and movement.
Right, and even for how cells kind of sense their environment.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing.
They do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Anesthetic gases.
Which obviously affect our consciousness.
Yeah, they knock us out.
They knock us out, yeah. They're known to interact with microtubules.
Interesting.
So a recent study using the radical pair mechanism suggests that a radical pair involving the amino acid tryptophan.
Tryptophan again?
Tryptophan's popping up a lot.
It is, yeah.
And superoxide might actually be sensitive to these super weak hypomagnetic fields.
Wow.
And this could be how they influence the stability and organization of the microtubules.
It's amazing how these tiny fields can have such an effect.
Right. Yeah. And they even predict that this effect might depend on the isotope of zinc, which interacts with microtubules.
Interesting.
So again, isotopes coming into play.
It all comes back to isotopes.
Yeah.
And there's a figure in the review that illustrates this too.
Right. So even something as fundamental as the structural framework inside our cells might be subtly influenced by the magnetic environment.
It's pretty mind-bending.
It is mind-bending. And then there's another example about hypomagnetic fields and neurogenesis in the hippocampus.
Neurogenesis.
So the birth of new brain cells in the hippocampus.
Which is the area of the brain involved in learning and memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, okay.
So
what do they say about that?
That research points to a possible role for a specific radical pair involving a flavin molecule.
A flavin molecule,
which is this type of organic compound that's important in a lot of biological reactions.
A lot of reactions,
And superoxide.
Okay, so another superoxide radical pair.
Yeah, superoxide is popping up everywhere.
It is. It seems to be a common player.
And this could explain how these extremely low magnetic fields affect the birth of new neurons.
Fascinating.
And again, this depends on the idea that the flipping between singlet and triplet states in this particular radical pair is sensitive to the surrounding magnetic field.
Even when it's super weak.
Even when it's super weak.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these tiny forces can have such a big impact.
It really is.
Okay, so the review gives us all these tantalizing clues and potential explanations based on this radical pair mechanism.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty powerful concept.